Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Okay, so we have been looking at some of the important sadhanams that are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, that are taught by Bhagavan Sri Krishna to Arjuna. So in the previous talk, we looked at Karma Yoga. Today we are going to look at, as much as we can, on Bhakti Yoga, So Bhakti is a word that is familiar to everybody. It's used very commonly, very often in religious pursuit, but not understood particularly clearly all the time, poorly understood. Bhakti is often translated in English language as devotion. So what does this mean? What does the word devotion mean? So the word devotion implies being connected to something or someone with a sense of loyalty, attachment, dedication, So one can be devoted to one's family, devoted to one's profession, to the arts, to the country, Desh Bhakta, So it has, in that kind of a sense, is the word devotion. The word yoga, as we know, has to do with, uniting is something special, a connection in this context in which we are looking at, in the context of religious and spiritual pursuit. It relates to the connection between an individual and the Lord and Bhagavan, The words that we use between the jiva, the individual, and Parameshwara. And the word yoga also implies a union or oneness or non-separation from that which one is attached to, one is devoted to. So this is what we mean by, so is bhakti is a devotion, and then in the context here, in our context, it has to do with Ishvara, with the Lord. And it has something to do with the relationship between the jiva and Ishvara. What exactly is bhakti? When we say bhakti, bhakti is unlike karma that we saw. Bhakti is not something one can do. Don't do bhakti. One can sing, but you don't do bhakti. There's no action as such meant by the word bhakti. Neither is bhakti something to understand, no, in the sense. So like mathematics, how to 2 plus 2 is 4. It's a cognitive, purely cognitive thing. It's not just something which you cognitively know or understand. So what is it then? What is this bhakti? Is it an emotion? People think there's something to do with emotions. What is it an emotion? Some special kind of an emotion that a person feels? It's not really an emotion like the emotions we know, like anger. If I use the word anger, sadness, anxiety, fear, these kinds of emotions or emotional states of the mind, everybody recognizes. We experience them in a similar way, But when I use the word devotion, bhakti, what comes to my mind, in terms of what kind of an emotion is this? I know anger, I know fear, I know sadness. Do I know bhakti? So a little bit uncertain now. you know. Bhakti means different things to different people. Somebody will think of Hanumanji, Mirabai. Someone thinks of some occasion. Someone thinks of bhajans. Someone thinks of the Lord. It's all different kinds of thoughts come to one's mind. It's not a simple emotion that one suddenly feels, I would say bhakti is a complex, more complex. One can say it's a sentiment which is made up of many things. It involves affection. It includes wonderment. There is reverence. There is a commitment. There is humility, prayerfulness, shraddha, loyalty, all these things. And mixed in with a certain understanding of what one is devoted to. Bhakti towards something. So it's a complex sentiment made up of many components, many different emotions, and also a certain kind of understanding that goes with it. So we could look upon it that way. And in our context, as I said, it is a connection, some kind of a relationship between an individual and Ishvara. You know, is this relationship like anyone else, any other relationship, or is it something unique? You know, so as human beings, we relate to the world all the time, and we relate to other people too. And in relating to people, we play different roles. So the same person, I'm a father to some, I may be a son to someone, I'm a employer, I'm a citizen. So like that, I'm different things, different roles I play in my relationship to the world, to other individuals, to other people, to other beings. And these roles are variable. They're also not universal. So one person may be a father to his children, or another person may not be a father if he doesn't have any progeny. So not everyone is a father. Not everyone is an employer. Some are employees. So all these roles that we play are relative roles, and don't all apply to everybody uniformly. But there is one particular role which one can say is something more fundamental. It's a fundamental role. It's a universal role that applies to everybody. And what is that? And that is the role of a created being to the creator. So we find ourselves in this world as created beings. We have come here. And so we seek to know the source from which we have come, who's responsible for this whole, our being here and the whole universe. It's beyond one's parents. That's not what we are talking about. So this I'm a created, I see myself as a created being, and that must involve some creator, I wonder. And that I want to know, that I want to connect to my source. And this particular relationship is universal. It applies to everybody. It's fundamental. And in our tradition, we also look upon this as a relationship between the individual and the total. You know, the source is looked upon as the total, and then I in the individual within the total. Total always includes the individuals and is beyond the individuals put together. So it's a relationship between the created and the creator, between the individual and the total. between the Bhakta and Ishvara, Parameshwara, in other words, in our context. So the fundamental relationship is the one that is involved in this bhakti, you know. Even though we talk of bhakti in other contexts also, but here what we are looking at is the bhakti or the devotion that is there, that arises in a individual. So this sentiment of bhakti, as I said, it is not something one can do. It's not something to just know, like I know things, about my mind and so on. But it is something that happens. It is a sentiment that is evoked in oneself. It is like love. So often compared to Parama Prema Swarupa Bhakti, it is said. So it is Prema Swarupa. It is in the form of, it is an expression of love in connection with that which is Parameshwara, which is the Lord. And so this is something that has to be evoked in oneself. You can't do anything to experience love. You can't get us knowledge in order to experience love. It's an expression, it's an experience, it's a sentiment that has to be evoked, and that gets evoked given certain environmental conditions. And so then you know what it is. And bhakti is like that. Everyone has the potential to be a bhakta. Everyone has a potential to know this sentiment of bhakti, because everyone, as I said, is in this fundamental relationship between oneself and one's source from which one has come. So this relationship being fundamental, this potential for this particular sentiment to manifest is also there in everybody, just as in every person there is a potential to evoke love in them by virtue of being a human being, by virtue of relating to others, to the world, to the people, to the environment. So that is the nature of bhakti. And this in bhakti, later on, Sri Krishna talks to Arjuna about the type of bhakti, how this bhakti is manifest in the context of this relationship. And like any other relationship, this bhakti also evolves. The bhakta, it matures. All relationships have to mature. They grow. And what makes them grow? They don't remain stagnant the same way. Love doesn't remain stagnant. It matures. A child's love to the parent matures. Early on, it's full of dependency. Later on, that becomes an adult, becomes a youth. So as the person grows, as that's why relationship grows, understanding grows. An important part of this relationship is understanding, what I'm relating to, who am I relating to. And once I understand the nature, the object of my devotion, the better I understand what it is about, the more mature becomes my relationship. And that is the nature of a bhakta also. We'll see that little later. But in this, so as one comes to know, as you know the person more and more, then you are able to relate in a more realistic manner. And that is what is maturity. So, what is this object of my devotion? Bhagavan. So, Sri Krishna, when in talking to Arjuna about bhakti, talks to him about what the nature of Bhagavan is. What is Ishvara? He says. And then he talks about the Ishvara is the Karanam, Jagat Karanam, the cause of everything. Etad yoni ni bhutani sarvani tyupadharaya aham kritsnasya jagataha prabhavav pralayastatha. He said, so Sri Krishna as Ishvara, he's talking. So I am the one. Ishvara is the one from whom everything has come, And that which is manifest, he says, is I am the source of all. Etad here refers to Prakriti, So we say there is Prakriti. What is this whole? What is the cause of this manifest universe that I experience? Is called as Prakriti, And what is Prakriti? It says Prakriti is Ishvarasya Shakti, is Prakriti, So there is a potential, Shakti in the form of potential. There is a potential that belongs to Ishvara, that is connected to Ishvara, that is non-separate from Ishvara, who's the source. And that Prakriti, when manifest, is what is this nature of this world. This Prakriti is constituted of different qualities, different gunas. And those gunas bring about differences that we experience, Because otherwise the whole thing should be one homogeneous mass, like gold, So you have a whole big mass of gold. Gold is gold is gold, But then when the same gold undergoes changes, takes on different forms, takes on different names, takes on different functions and characteristics, then you can put one on your nose, one on your ear, one around your neck. It becomes all kinds of ornaments. It takes on a variety of names and forms with different characteristics, and different functions. But essentially, it's the same thing. So here also the world is not just one uniform, whatever it may be, Prakriti, but it's experienced in many different ways. And those differences are brought about by what we call as gunas or qualities. These are qualitative differences between things. That's what makes for the differences. And this Prakriti is Ishvara also, not separate from Ishvara, not sitting outside of Ishvara. In any creation, there is a twofold cause. There is a cause that involves knowledge. No creation can take place without some pre-existing knowledge. Something is there for you to make something meaningful or purposeful. One has to first have knowledge of it, of what you're going to do. And then there is the stuff that is made of. So this whole universe also, I'm assuming, that has come about must have there has to be knowledge somewhere of it, such a thing which is orderly, which is infallible, where everything is in harmony, Look at the nature around us. So there has to be some intelligence, and there has to be, where did all these things that I am experiencing, where is all this coming from? So that karanam, one is called as nimittam, nimitta karanam, one is called as upadanam, or the material, the stuff it's made up of, that's experienced, And so that is what is Prakriti and Ishvara, Purusha. And then he says, this is everything. Aham kritsnasya jagataha prabhavaha pralayaha. I am the one in this twofold form, nimitta upadana karanam, as the one from whom everything is manifest and unto which everything becomes unmanifest. Because that is the nature of the experienced world. When we say it is manifest, Remember, manifestation is always your manifest to something. Okay. You don't just manifest. When I say something is manifest, there has to be somebody to whom it is manifest. Otherwise, there is no manifest. When the tree fell somewhere in the forest, it made a sound. Suppose there is nobody around. Did the tree make a sound? Is a question they ask. Did it make a sound or no? If there is nobody to hear it, not even animals, then, well, some will say, well, it did make a sound. Somebody will say, no, it did not make a sound. Because how do you define a sound? A sound is something you hear. If you don't hear it, then what? Is there a sound? Dogs hear so many sounds. We don't hear them. Is the sound there or is it not there? Well, it is there for the dog. It's not there for me. Okay. So manifest, it is manifest in the dog's ear. It's not manifest in my ear. So this manifestation always involves something else also. We got to keep that in mind. So anyway, so Ishvara is that from which everything has come, into which everything resolves. And then in between what happens is the same Ishvara that also sustains it. Okay. So he says, and this is not just a one-time occurrence. This is something that happens again and again. So the manifest, from the manifest, there is the unmanifest. From the unmanifest, again, it becomes manifest. Prakritim swam adhishtambya visrujami punaf punaha. He says, Bhuta grama imam krishnam avashyam prakritir vashat. Punaf punaha, again and again. That's why we look upon this creation as cyclical in our tradition. That is how Ishvara is understood. Okay. Now this, once everything has come from Ishvara, what does Ishvara do? Does he sit outside of it or he is very much in it? He says Ishvara is not outside of it, but is very much in and through the manifestation. Okay. Not sitting outside the manifestation. Like even a dreamer and the dream. When you look at a dream, there is a whole dream world which is manifest. When you dream something, there is a dream world that is manifest. And then from whom is that world manifest? The cause. Well, the cause is called as the dreamer, And this dream world that came from the dreamer, from the mind, is it separate from the dreamer or is it part of the dreamer? You can say, well, it is experienced as separate because the dreamer sees the dream. But at the same time, in the dream, where in the dream is the dreamer? If somebody asks a question, you have to say the dreamer is all over the dream. Even though experiencing it outside of itself, it is still the whole. In fact, the whole dream is sustained by the dreamer. It came from the dreamer. It is sustained by the dreamer. It resolves back into the dreamer. That is the kind of relationship that is there between Bhagavan, Ishvara, who is the called as Srishti Sthiti Laya Karta, Laya Karana. He's the one who, from whom it's manifest, who sustains, and to whom it is resolved. So therefore, and in the manifest world, how is he there? In what form? He says in a twofold way. He talks to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, he teaches him. This whole universe is called as Vishwam. And this Vishwam, which is made up of varieties of things. And this Vishwam itself is non-separate from Ishvara. Ishvara abides in this whole Vishwam. In what way? In the form of the infallible order. When you look around us, there is order. There is no chaos, in nature. We are part of nature, don't forget. So there's no chaos here. Everything, there's a geological order. There is a anatomical order, anatomy, physical order. There's a chemical order. There's a psychological order. In fact, everywhere there is order. Therefore, you have science. Okay. Yeah. If there was no order, there would be no science. Because science seeks to know, understand the order, really speaking. When they come up with their theories, they're just trying to find explanations for the order that is seen and trying to recognize the order, identify it, understand it. There would be no science if there was no order. And so in the form of this very order, and the order is not fallible. Order is uniform, applies to everyone equally. There are no biases or prejudices. Bhagwan's laws are not like the laws made by human mind, which are always relative and lacking and inadequate in some area or the other. So in this form of order, he is manifest in this whole Vishwam. And in fact, the whole Vishwam is Bhagavan's form. It is Bhagavan's Rupam. Therefore, it's called Vishwarupam. So to Arjuna wanted to see this. And he asks Bhagavan, so I know you in this way, but I also know that you are that divinity. You are Ishvara, you are the Lord. What is this form of yours? Your original form, he wanted to see. And so Bhagavan Krishna shows him. He tells him first. So that form you can't just see with your eyes, with these eyes, physical eyes. Because the physical eyes can only see what is limited. Their scope is limited. Even X-ray we cannot see. We don't have X-ray vision. So how are you going to see this whole Vishwam, Bhagavan's form? So for that you need a special eyes. They're called as Divya Chakshu, Te Dadami. He says, I'll endow you with this Divya Chakshu. This Divya Chakshu in the form of knowledge, in the form of wisdom, in the form of insight. That is the seeing, the vision. And so then with that he gives him this Vishwarupa Darshan. Vishwarupam means, Vishwarupam is not another form, a big form, stretching up to you can't even see the head, or so many heads, etc. That is only the artist's depiction in a picture. But Vishwarupam means he, in Sanskrit, if you know, it's a Bahuvrihi. Vishwam Rupam Yasya. So for whom whose form is the entire Vishwam is called Vishwarupam, And so which is Ishvara? If Ishvara has to have a form, his form has to be Vishwam. So he abides in this whole Vishwam as Vishwam. That is his Rupam. So Arjuna sees that, but he doesn't see it fully, in the sense he also sees himself he separates himself out. You know, he separates himself out from this form. When he separates himself out, then he gets scared, you know, because fear is born only in separation. Dvaitat bhayam bhavati. Separation causes fear, you know, fear of loss. First of all, everybody has this from childhood onwards. In the beginning, baby infant is not really afraid, you know. They experience discomfort, not fear. Then slowly they develop an individuality. When I develop an individuality, I see myself separate from others. And when I see myself separate from others, then depending on who they are and my relationship and connect, I form attachments. And attachments, then attachment brings about fear. Fear of losing, loss. Okay. Fear of loss. Therefore, baby gets attached to the mother. Mother goes to work. Baby gets panicky, you know. So attachment always gives rise to fear. And etc. or a whole bunch of things. So Dvaitam, the separation, because then you don't want to separate from that which you are attached to. And so this separation creates a fear. And that is the fundamental fear of a jiva. I'm separate from my source. I see myself as separate from my source. And in that separation, I want to get back together, you know. And it has to resolve in non-separation, which is really the end point of bhakti, you know. Arjuna sees himself as separate, so he gets scared of the form. So infinite, of course you're going to get scared because I'm just a small individual. Then he tells Bhagavan, you please come back to your original form. This is too scary for me. So this, Bhagavan, abides in this whole world. The divinity manifests in many different ways. He also teaches him how to recognize that a bhakta, once a devotion is born in a person, and as his understanding improves of what is the nature of this devotion, who am I devoted to, then he starts seeing things. He gets this chakshu in his head to see that which is divyam, you know, all devas, in the form of divinity manifest. So he guides him there. He teaches, he says, how I am manifest in this world. In the beginning, by seeing things which are a wonder, things that stand out, things that are unique, things that are special. And you look at them and then you wonder, that wonderment, you know, and that start appreciating in things which are extraordinary. One starts appreciating the presence of divinity. And then from there on, as the understanding expands, even in ordinary things, one sees it, and then you see nothing but that, you know. So that is the nature of bhakta's devotion and understanding. So here, not only is Ishvara manifest in this whole Jagat, in the Vishwam, but he says he also transcends it at the same time. You know, if we say everything, Bhagavan is manifest himself, then the next question will be, well, you know, this world is inert also. So what happened to Ishvara? Does Ishvara become inert when he manifests, you know? So even though manifest, like the dreamer, you know, So in the dream world, there are a lot of things are there. There is inert things, there are life things, there are people there, you know. And so the dreamer is all over the dream world also, we saw. But then even though he's all over the dream world, but the dreamer still stands separate from the dream world too, as a witness, okay, of the dream world. So not only is he in it, he's also separate from it. He also transcends at the same time. Okay. Otherwise, it will be like pantheism. The world is God. There is no God outside of other than the world. It's not like that. Ishvara is someone that abides in everything and at the same time transcends everything that there is. Matsthani sarva bhutani, nacha matsthani bhutani, he says. Everything is dependent on that on which everything is dependent is called Ishvara. At the same time, Ishvara is not dependent on anything else. It's not mutually dependent, because one transcends and one, at the same time, one is dependent on the others, transcends and abides. That is how we understand the nature of Ishvara. So in talking to Arjuna about bhakti, Sri Krishna talks to him about different types of bhaktas. It's really not different types of bhaktas in the sense, it is different stages of bhakti, the growth, because it's in the form of a relationship. So in this, he talks about 4 types of bhaktas, or 4 stages, I would say, in the growth of bhakti. And so for Chaturvida bhajante mam, Jana Sukriti Norjuna Artaha Jignasu Artharthi Jnani Cha Bharatarshapha. He says there are 4 types of devotees, or 4 stages in the growth of a devotee. One is called as a Artaha. Artaha is a devotee. They're all devotees. A devotee, of course, here is one who is devoted to Bhagavan. Whichever form one visualizes Bhagavan, doesn't matter here. So Artaha is a person who thinks of Ishvara when he is in crisis or she is in crisis, at times of distress, he says. At the time of distress, he thinks of Bhagavan, called Artaha. Then there is one called as Artharthi. One grows, Sometimes he feels Bhagavan responded to his call. Sometimes he feels he didn't respond. Anyway, but at least he thinks of the Lord when there's a problem. And he has devotion. Then, as he matures, he understands that Bhagavan is there in everything that happens, result of anything that he does, in the form of what is called as karma phaladata. He is the one who gives the results of the action. There are laws of dharma, there are laws of karma, and all those laws are non-separate from Ishvara. And so through these laws, he gives me the results of my action. He is there in and through all of these. So as he seeks, whatever he seeks, different things in life, he recognizes that there is always Ishvara there involved. And Daivam, what we call as Daivam, in getting the results of any action, there are 3-fold things that are there in Prayatnam, Kalam, and Daivam. Prayatnam is effort. One has to make a certain effort to accomplish something. And then effort is not enough. Just because I do effort doesn't mean immediately I get what I want. It takes its own time. Sometimes it's a short while, sometimes it's a long while. But time factor is there. But then there are also unknown variables. Besides the known variables, which I can take care of because of my free will, and my actions. I can take care of known variables. But there are unknown variables. And sometimes they make a big difference. In fact, most of the time, to me, they make all the difference because I don't know them. And so I only go by the known, and I do something, I think something will happen, and it doesn't happen. Because unknown variables come into the picture. But then, even though they are unknown to me, I recognize something, and I recognize that they still function within the broader scope of the laws of Bhagavan, you know, karma, dharma, karma. So that recognition is a very profound recognition, because in that I know that those laws, those variables unknown to me, don't really matter that much, because I have trust that they are uniform, they are fair, they are Bhagavan's laws. And so whatever the result comes has the touch of Ishvara, because he pervades everything. So in every seeking, even though I may seek many things in the world, small or big, but I recognize the Daivam aspect of it. And this person is a Artharthi, seeks many things, Arthas, but with a certain sensitivity, is a little more mature in terms of devotion. Okay. And then from then on, there's another one who Jignasu is called as a Jignasu. Jignasu is the one who wants to know. Jnatum Ichha is Jignasa, the desire to know. Now he wants, it's not enough just to know that much. There is Daivam, there is unknown variables, etc. But I want to know more. I want to really know what this Bhagavan is about. What is taught as explained in our scriptures, etc. So this desire to inquire further, what is really my relationship? What is my connection? How do I discover it? All these kinds of things is spiritual quest, what we look upon as a spiritual quest. And so the one who has this spiritual quest to seek to know the nature of Parameshwara, he is called as a Jignasu. And he does whatever has to be done. So in terms of inquiry, in terms of disciplines, to make his mind ready to know. And then finally he says, Jnani, the fourth one is called as Jnani. And Jnani is the one now, he has that recognition. Through the spiritual discipline and inquiry process, he has gained the knowledge that separation, up to that point, there is a separation. Then the one who knows really has recognized the non-separation between the Jiva and Ishvara, between the individual and the total. Okay. As long as the individual sees himself separate from the total, there is fear. But the individual recognizes that I am non-separate from the total. That happens, that person is called as a jnani. And so he says, Tesham jnani nitya yuktaha eka bhaktir vishishyate. Among these, so the mature, the fulfillment of devotion. Devotion has to fulfill itself. It's not just a good feeling we are looking for. There are many feelings that are there. Some are good, some are make me miserable. And only things that make me happy, joyful, fun. So we seek those kinds of things because they make us feel good. But then they come and go. They come and go. They don't endure. So this is not bhakti is also, oh, I like to go listen to bhajans because it makes me feel good. Makes me feel good. It's true. It makes me feel good. But then what happens at the end of it? It comes to an end at some point. Sampradaya bhajans, go to concert or something, kirtan, bhajan group. And it lasts for a while. Then it's over. Once it's over, it's over. The sentiment doesn't sustain, doesn't endure. Bhakti has to endure, An emotional state doesn't endure. So this jnana is nitya yuktaha. He has discovered that oneness, and it's not a oneness that is transient. It is a oneness that is enduring. Not endure means put up with, not that endure. It is something that sustains, because it is his nature. Bhagavan is, he says, I abide in every individual as his innermost being. He's antaryami. He's the one who's abiding in me in the form of my Atma, non-separate from my Atma, that I am, not the individual that I think myself to be. So in that recognition, the devotee discovers the non-separation or oneness with that he is devoted to, Eka bhaktir vishishyate, Eka bhakti means there is nothing else. There is nothing else other than Ishvara, really speaking. Here, that is also called surrender. We say Sharanagati, So in Sharanagati, people think, there is, that as long as I see a separation, that is one level of Sharanagati, at the feet of the Lord. Even for a merger, there are two entities, There are two entities that merge. Here, there is a non-self. There is in two. The two become one. There is only one. This always creates an issue, People think, how can you say Bhagwan, Jiva is Ishvara? How can you say that? Arrogant, Okay. Atma. Jivatma is Paramatma. They are the same. How can it be the same? They are not the same. Jiva is not the same as Ishvara. Everybody knows that. It's obvious. Then what is it? No, they are one. So one, what do you mean by one? Does the Jiva, Jiva becomes Ishvara. That sounds good, That sounds good. For the Jiva, it sounds good. Oh, Jiva, I'll become Ishvara. Or is it the other way? Or does the Ishvara become Jiva? That way also you could go. No, that sounds blasphemous. This sounds at least, promising. Who would not like that? Is that what happens? What happens to this individual fellow? There is no individual. He is effaced. Was there an individual when I was born? It's interesting. Think about it. When a baby is just born, is there an individual? Is there do you have a identity? There is no identity. Identity ka I, when the baby says I, before it doesn't say I right away. It always says whatever you say, you know. If you call him baby, baby, suppose you name him baby. Then if he wants something, it'll say baby want this, baby want that, he'll say. He's not going to say I. The parent never calls the baby I. Correct? We always call it by some name. You don't call it I. And the kid also doesn't use I. He uses that name. But one day, when he grows a little bit, couple of years, he suddenly starts saying I. It's called ego development. He recognizes himself as an entity, the person. At the birth, it's only experiences. So, so anyway, so this I, for a bhakta, there is no I. There is only Ishvara he sees. He only sees, recognizes Bhagavan. That is another level of Sharanagati, you know. So in that Sharanam, he has already Agatam, you know, he's Agatam. He doesn't have to surrender because there's nothing to surrender. He doesn't see, only Bhagavan is there for a bhakta. You know, that is Sharanagati. So he says, Jnani, Tesham Jnani, he is Nitya Yuktaha. There's nothing there to separate again. Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate Priyo Me Jnani no Atyartham. And he says, such a person is the closest to me. Closest because he's not non-separate, of course. Said discovered. Like that, he talks to him about these different types of bhakti. Then, of course, also mentions somebody who does not recognize this at all. Namam dushkritino mudaha prapadyante naradhamaha mayaya aparita jnanaha asuram bhavamastitaha. Then there are other avivekis who do not think through at all anything. They don't even recognize or want to recognize something which is other than this Daivam operating. And so such a people just get caught up in this Maya, in the Maya, and then just do things which go against Dharma, you know. So he mentions them also. And then for the bhakta and the bhakti, and then this bhakti itself, his sentiment is there. So it's not just about sentiments then. So let's say there's a bhakta who discovers this sentiment of bhakti is evoked in him, arises in him. And then what do you do with that? You do it expresses, you know. All sentiments have to be expressed. They should be expressed, in fact, you know. That is what makes them real. That's what makes them alive, you know. And so he expresses it in different ways, you know. Thus we have this various forms of bhakti talked about. Navavidha bhakti. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnoho Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Dasyam Atmanivedanam Sakyam. All these forms of bhakti are there that are mentioned in our tradition. And so Arjuna, even Sri Krishna tells him, you know, calls him. He surrenders to the Lord as a student first, because he wants to know as a jignasu. He says, Bhaktosi me sakha cheti. He says, you have this bhakti in you, sentiment, and you are a friend also, sakyam. Yes, sakhya bhakti. Sakyam is expressed in the form of sentiment of friendliness, So different expressions are there of this bhakti. There is no one particular behavior or one particular feeling. And so thus there are different forms of bhakti. Our worship is like that. Worship is an expression of a sentiment. Religious practices are expressions of sentiment. People have this very limited notion. They say, I don't believe in religiosity. I only believe in spirituality. Spirituality. So I don't believe in all these things, practices. Some people think like that. And the only reason why they think like that is because they don't understand any of it. Yeah. Either if you don't understand it, then what are you going to do? It's cumbersome. Instead of seeking to understand something which I don't understand, then I say, oh, this is all I don't understand, so I don't believe in it. Religious practices are not to be believed in. Religious practices are expressions, they're expressions of sentiment. And when the sentiment is there, then one needs to express it, because that is what makes it real. That's why in birthday and all that, I love you and so on. So all these gifts and all that we do, we give. Some people only show their sentiments through giving. Some people by talking in different ways, but they have to be expressed. So bhaktas express it in varieties of ways. So all of this we see in this bhakti. When Sri Krishna talks about bhakti, it is not like karma. Unlike karma, karma is things based on action, choices, right and wrong, duties, to be done, not to be done. So there are spiritual disciplines. Jnanam is something to know, to understand, to recognize. It's a jnana yoga. And then there is bhakti, which is because all are important. All are important. This is not just three different paths, and you pick and choose whichever you think is convenient to you. What is convenient? Performing actions is convenient? Is feeling convenient? Do you have a choice between thinking, understanding, feelings, doing? Human being doesn't have a choice. We are all three. We're all three. And so it doesn't really matter. All of this come together. Karma, bhakti, and jnanam. So bhakti also, it addresses the emotional aspect of a person along with knowledge. It involves a certain understanding too, the sentiments. So all of these kind of come together. And so he talks at length to Arjuna about karma, about bhakti, and about jnanam also. So in the next talk, we'll see about what jnanam is about and the role that plays in this spiritual journey. Okay? So with that, I'll conclude this talk. So Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om